hearty welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in on this really cold evening in Cape Town. This evening is going to be a short session, unfortunately, but we are definitely planning a follow-up, which we can extend a few weeks down the line, provided there's no load shedding. So a huge welcome to two wonderful, wonderful guests in my kitchen, Dr. Hannah Korten and Gayle Friedman. Both these ladies are specialists in their field with years of experience behind them. And it's a lovely sort of tuned in, honed in topic tonight, where we're going to focus on pregnancy, on women who have just fallen pregnant, who have just had babies. Hannah specializes in chiropractics, and particularly prenatal and perinatal chiropractics, and chiropractics for babies, which was something I've just learned about, like, you know, not being a mom. So I think it's amazing. We had a chat, and you know, really the health of our bodies is dictated to by the health of our spine. Gayle Friedman, a lady that I've heard so much about over many, many years, with a huge amount of experience in she's a yoga teacher specializing in pregnancy yoga, is a doula, has quite a few modalities that she's really versed in and applies depending on what's needed at the time. So both of them have collaborated, and that's where I actually met Gayle at Dr. Korten's practice a few weeks ago. So the collaboration, the conversation between the two of them can only be but nurturing. So ladies, welcome to the house. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Elaine. That was a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Just checking. Yeah, I'm off mute. Okay, cool. Yeah. So Gayle and I connected recently, actually. I realized that a lot of the pregnant moms that I was seeing in practice were being taken care of by Gayle as their doula through their pregnancy and birth. So her name kept popping up. And then we connected on, I think it was Instagram, and then she came and ran a baby massage workshop at our practice, and that's where we officially met. So it's been really cool, yeah, just connecting, hearing first all about her, and then connecting. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here, just chatting together. I'll give a little background of myself. I'm like Elaine said, a pediatric and perinatal chiropractor, and I kind of just found that passion as I went along. I studied chiropractic. Well, I grew up in Ladysmith in Natal, and then I studied chiropractic in Durban at DUT. And then while I was studying, I met my husband, his name's Josh, and he's also a chiropractor. We met at an international chiropractic conference in the States, and he's Canadian. And we had this romantic long distance dating period and got engaged, and then ended up getting married, and I moved over to Canada once we were married. And being in Canada, in the time leading up to that, I just really started being interested in when I heard about baby chiropractic and pregnancy and chiropractic, and it was just always sparked my interest. And when I moved to Canada, or leading up to that, I realized that being in North America, I'd be exposed to a lot of opportunities to really specialize it and go further. So I pursued that. And actually, I was telling Elaine about it. The thing that kind of started the studying further side of pediatrics and pregnancy was quite an adventure too. I took off a month while I was visiting Josh in Canada before we were married. I took off a month and I backpacked in the States because I was a student at the time and was on a very strict budget. So I took my little backpack and I caught public transport around America and followed all these conferences that were happening in pediatrics and pregnancy, and just managed to get a whole lot of them done in a month that way. And it was just quite an adventure, and on a really strict student budget. So it was definitely passion driven. And then since then, just from starting practicing in Canada, I just had that as my focus from the get-go, pregnancy and pediatrics. And yeah, it's a real passion of mine. And Elaine summed it up really well with like what our belief is in the type of chiropractic that I practice. And it is that health stems from the nervous system. And if you think about it, we love asking people like, what is the number one organ that controls everything in the body? And a lot of people answer the heart because it is a very important organ. But if you think of the one that actually controls everything, even the heart, it's the brain and the nervous system. And as chiropractors, our philosophy or belief system is that you've got this beautiful electric organ that's controlling everything. And the most important part of it, channeling that communication, is held within the spine. And when you get shifts in the bones and in the vertebra in the spine, it can put pressure or stretch on nerves and interfere with how the signal is sent from the brain to the rest of the body. And our focus as chiropractors is realigning the spine so that pressure is taken off the nerves, and then the whole body as a whole can function the way we were created to function. So just optimizing overall function of the nervous system, if I had to summarize it, that's our whole focus in practice. Yeah, so that's my philosophy behind pregnancy chiropractic and chiropractic for babies. Early on, when I started specializing and just working with pregnant mamas, I soon started hearing of these really cool stories of chiropractors actually going to women's births and labors and adjusting moms while they were laboring. It's not something that's super common, but there were always really cool stories around what happened when you removed interference from a woman who's busy laboring. And so I just started offering that as something that I could do for the moms that I was looking after throughout pregnancy. And so that's also become something that's been very interesting field to go into more and learn more about, and just be available to serve in, is adjustments in labor. And I get a lot of people asking, can adjustments start labor, and can it speed things up? And the short answer is no. Adjustments can't force a woman to force her body to do something it's not ready for. But if there's interference in her nervous system and her body is trying to labor and trying to get things going, and there's a block that's stopping that, if you remove that, then you do see labor speed up and start if the body was trying to start it. So it's a really incredible way of just witnessing what the body does when you remove interference from it. I'll share a couple stories on labor adjustments, but first I actually wanted to just ask if anyone has questions on what I've said already, so we can have it as more of a conversation.
I think at the moment they're just loving the storytelling.
Okay.
I'll monitor any questions if
Okay, sweet.
you put it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll let Hannah know. But I'm loving hearing this.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, okay, so I'll tell a couple stories. So my first birth I ever went to was a friend of mine, and she was doing a home birth, and I'd never done it before, but I was like, hey, I've heard of beautiful stories from other people who have had labor adjustments, and if it's something you're interested in, I'll come to your house and adjust you in labor. And for her, it did speed things up. Like, she got an adjustment, then she rested, and then after her second one, within minutes afterwards, she transitioned, which is when a woman goes to being fully dilated, but 10 centimeters dilated. And often it's a very obvious time in birth where there's a lot of maybe nausea or throwing up, or women saying, I just can't do this anymore. And then the way to definitively know is for a midwife to check how dilated they are. And yeah, for her, that happened so quickly after the adjustment. So it was cool to just see, like, her body was trying to do this for hours and hours already, and then removing that blockage just opened things for her. The coolest story was actually 9 days after our own daughter was born. So we did a home birth with our daughter. And 9 days later, one of my friends, who was a chiropractor as well, went into labor. And the plan was that I would go to her labor as well. And she was kind of like tentative about it. And she's like, "You just had your baby 9 days ago. I like, things are happening. I don't want," and I was like, "No, I'm there." So went down, met her at the birthing center. And she was still in very early stages. Her first labor had been very long and complicated, and she'd been exhausted, and she was gearing up for the same experience. And when she arrived at the birthing suite, when I arrived, she was very early stages of labor still. She was like asking me what position I would like her in, like, was it easier if she sat or lay down? And the type of adjustments you do in labor, you do in any position. Like, we use something called an arthrostim gun, which is, it basically looks like a big gun with these 2 prongs on the end, and it vibrates really quickly, and it feels amazing for pain relief. And you can do it in whatever position the mom's laboring in. So for her, I was like, "No, you just do your thing." We did the adjustments, and we worked on her pelvis probably for 15 minutes. And then she also transitioned really quickly during one of the adjustments, and her baby was born 5 minutes later. In Canada, you have to have a second midwife as like the backup. And she wasn't there yet. The first midwife was in the room, like busy calling the second one. So she basically just caught her own baby. And that was an incredible experience to be a part of, but also testimony in her preparation, because she was a chiropractor herself and had taken preparation of her pelvis throughout pregnancy very seriously. So for her, there was nothing big I had to do during the labor. It was just small shifts, and her body knew how to be aligned and then do what it was trying to do. And it's not every time that it speeds up as well. If a woman's body is not trying to, is not there yet and doesn't want to be birthing quickly, sometimes labor stays the same. And all the adjustment does is it's helping to just set up the body and the nervous system to birth how it's trying to birth and how it wants to birth. So it's not a thing that can induce labor in any way. It's not a thing that can artificially speed it up. It's just making space for the body and taking pressure off nerves so that things can go as the body is trying to go about them. Yeah, and then from a baby perspective, we believe that every child should be checked, at least for subluxations, that's misalignments in the spine, as soon as they are born, because there are shifts that can happen during the birthing process. I mean, there's a lot of squeezing for a baby who's having a vaginal birth. If you look at a typical birth, there's also a lot of pulling and twisting by medical professionals. If a baby's had a C-section, they can also have a lot of twisting and pulling. And so there's a lot of opportunities for misalignments in the spine. And if you can just take a brand new baby, remove interference from their nervous system, it just sets them up for developing optimally from the get-go, from day one. So with babies, they obviously can't talk and communicate with us. We use a lot of reflex testing to get windows into how their nervous system's doing, a lot of range of motion testing. It's all very gentle. When you are checking a baby, a newborn, often they'll sleep through the whole thing. There's no quick movements or cracking or pops or anything like that. It's all just gentle pressure, holding, and then you feel the joints slowly melt back into place because they're all cartilage and not the same bony structure as adults. Yeah, so just in summary, just to sum up, like what chiropractic is doing for a mom in pregnancy and in labor is there's a couple things, and 3 main things. Number one, it's aligning the bony structure to take pressure off nerves and allow the body to function optimally. I've already said that one. Number 2, if you look at a woman's pelvis, it's 2 bones that connect like this, and then you've got the tailbone here, and they need to line up nicely to make an oval shape for the baby to come through. Now, something we hear of often, especially in South Africa, where our C-section rate is close to 80% in the private sector, women are often told that their pelvis is too small to birth vaginally. And it is very rare that there's that is the true case. If that is the truth, usually there has to be a severe underlying malnutrition going on, where the bones have actually molded out of shape and they physically are not normal. or there's like crazy fractures that are fused in the wrong way. But a woman's, my belief, and what many holistic practitioners believe, is that a woman's body is not going to grow a baby that it can't birth. And I've seen over and over again in practice, women who are told that their pelvises are too small. And then I'll see an x-ray of their pelvis after they've had their babies, and their pelvis is the perfect size, totally normal. But in some cases, there's the shift going on. So instead of the pelvis being nice and round like that, one side is rotating forward and one back. So it does make a bit more of an obstacle for the baby to get through. And as chiropractors, we can do so much for that in the months leading up to the birth, in helping that mom to just realign it and just have this easy passage for the baby. And then lastly, another big thing that chiropractic does, labor adjustments do during the mom's delivery and labor, is the adjustment actually, how do I describe this? When we're using the vibrating gun on the mom's lower back, you're stimulating nerves that are called proprioceptive nerves, or the mechanical nerves in the body. And what that does is it sends a lot of information to the brain about vibration that the mom is feeling down there on her pelvis. And that stimulus that you're sending to the brain can trick the brain into not thinking about the pain. And you can actually lower the pain that the mom's feeling by a lot just with using that as a tool for pain coping mechanisms. And we do this all the time in everyday life. Like if we jam our fingers into a drawer, we automatically like rub them or blow on them. And that's just putting another stimulus over that area so that your brain doesn't feel the pain signals. We do it as well as women. Like if we have periods, period cramps, for example, or we like abdominal or lower back cramps, you put a hot water bottle on. You're making the most of those temperature receptors that are sending information to your brain and tricking your brain into not feeling the pain. And so many of the labor techniques, the natural drug-free labor techniques, make use of that as well, with counter pressure on the pelvis. And during labor, the adjustments and the arthrostim gun especially is doing that, sending those signals to the brain. And it's quite incredible, actually. Like recently connecting with Gayle, she showed me a maneuver that she often does with moms, just instinctively that really often opens up things and gets their body going with labor. And it was so cool because from like a science perspective and from studying the human body, it's like it makes total sense anatomically, physiologically, like what she's doing to the nervous system as she does this maneuver. And I'm not sure if you learned it somewhere, Gayle, or if it's just you were trusting your innate and you just knew it, but it looks very similar in some ways to how the adjustments that I'm doing during labor look.
Yeah. The one with holding the
sacrum, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just something that's grown on watching so many women in labor, Yeah. Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, absolutely. So that was amazing. I have a couple of questions, but I think Gayle, please take over from there, and let's then, just because of our limited time, and I'm going to reserve my questions for afterwards. So welcome and share with us your journey with this process.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate it. I was on a very intense Zoom meeting because as a doula, one of my hats that I wear, I'm also working towards creating a professionalism of what doulas are in the country, and working together. And last night was on a bit of an intense meeting of bringing all the doulas in South Africa in different modalities, because there's not only birth doulas, there's postpartum doulas, there's end-of-life doulas, there's bereavement doulas, there's, I don't know if you all know what the word doula is women who serve, of being service and serving whatever's needed in the moment. So whether it's life and birth, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but birth and passing out of this body are very similar. You're sitting, holding space. So I kind of have always been known from a young person that I was going to serve and went to study more occupational therapy, and then landed up bailing from that and going to India, and studied for 6 months in India, which gave me my whole basis of yoga. Then came back to South Africa, and then I didn't have children yet. Learned in those days there weren't official courses, but learned aroma, reflex, shiatsu, all these different body therapies, color therapy. But somewhere for me, I work at the core, which is energy, just energy. So with what Hannah's talking about, nervous system, I guess it's based on a similar rhythm, that if energy is flowing and we're breathing, everything's working. And if energy is contracted and we holding our breath, then there isn't flow. And that applies, I think that's the core of disease. Sometimes we don't even know where we're holding post any trauma, and that's where I think disease often builds up. And then once I'd qualified in all that, I fell pregnant. I'd actually witnessed a birth with a friend in Holland, which was a very good opening for me, because there they do home births. And then started to realize that I must channel my work into pregnancy, and then started teaching pregnancy yoga, doing treatments on pregnant women. I also had 3 home births. I had my children, my first child, my first little girl was pretty much on my own at home. But I never had fear of birth at all. I never had fear of birth. And I guess babies and mothers for me were just a very natural progression. Then I worked for years teaching pregnancy, teaching post-pregnancy, baby massage. And then I fell and broke my own jaw and wondered if I'd ever be able to come back and work. And every time my own body failed me, because the work I do is with my body, I became more subtle in my work. So from being a massage therapist to actually working very gently and sometimes not hardly even touching somebody. So that's a little bit different. And then about 14 years ago, I then trained to be a doula. And I've been a doula for 14 years, which means I'm employed by women privately. I did spend a lot of time working in government hospitals just to get a whole different experience there too. But there you don't get employed, it's more volunteer work. And I'm employed with them. I work on call. They call me when they starting to be in active labor, and then I arrive, whether it's at home or in a hospital. If we go to hospitals, we wear uniforms, and we kind of have had to sort of professionalize ourselves to be accepted in hospital environments. At first, the medics were very, like, who are these women? What are they doing? And we've had to form a trust. One of the things I use in labor and in hospitals a lot is aromatherapy, because just putting oils and beautiful aromas just shifts everybody. And I've been noting quite a few of women who write their birth plan state afterwards how, oh, I just remember when you walked in and you rubbed lavender all over me, or you put lemongrass, and just using the right oils at the right time, which goes through the nose into the olfactory part, and then also stimulates different parts of the brain, which then release hormones, and then you get a body reaction. So I'm trying to correlate what Hannah is saying with the nervous system and the hormonal system in terms of, I'm trying to think how to correlate that. So as I said, what I've learned, when we're born, the body is generally quite relaxed. We don't have control of, we wear nappies. Okay, I know this sounds quite intense, but listen to me, we don't wear. But then we're slowly taught to control our bladder and control our bowels and socialize, because that's something you don't. We're not like animals. You can just go to the loo whenever you want. And then women grow up, and especially in our modern culture, in the older days, women would work in the fields, they'd be squatting, they'd be sitting, they'd be more grounded and more physical in their body. But today, many women are sitting at desks, sitting in chairs, and Hannah, you were talking about the position of the spine. And then also, for me, the greatest thing of a natural birth is the position of the baby. Because if the baby's in a good position, big or small, it can actually move itself down. And the spine is held by the muscles. And where I was getting at with saying modern women, if you're sitting all day and you're doing a lot of exercise and you're overtoning, labor is about opening everything up. It's about sitting on a loo and just letting letting your whole body open. But it's really difficult to just do that if your muscle memory has been tone, hold, close in, apply to work, do this. So everything is so structured, and labor is wild, and it's opening your jaw, and it's opening your pelvis, and it's releasing your whole being to allow this baby to be born. On another level, also, something is wrong with our system all over the world, not only here. Why are we giving birth in places where people are ill? Doesn't make sense. So newborn life is coming into the world in a place where sick people go too. It's you walk into a hospital and there's fear and there's emergency. And I'm not saying if a baby, if there's a problem with a baby that we don't need medical care, but all that builds up what we call adrenaline. And the opposite of adrenaline is oxytocin. And oxytocin is the hormone which is released when you conceive your baby. It's the hormone that is released when somebody hugs you, when somebody holds you, when somebody makes you feel safe. And if you're not feeling safe, adrenaline comes in and it blocks that, as opposed to, oxytocin flowing. So we're working constantly with that. And so I guess, Hannah, what you're talking about also is that then everything tightens up. And instead of relaxing and opening, everything's tightening, which works against the flow of labor. I have learned, as I said, all my work now is based on helping people to slow down, relax, whether it's through yoga or whether it's through very gentle aromatherapy, reflexology treatments, to decompress and to start preparing them to go inward so that they are able to relax. And as I said, one of the things I've learned, and I teach it to the fathers, is just simply put your hand on the mom's back, right on her coccyx, and just hold it and gently rock it. And within a half an hour of a mom holding and almost feeling like she's needing pain relief, and you just put her hand there, she just relaxes and the baby's just comes out. It's just born that way, so I just find that everything I do is trying to decompress, trying to relax, because the other thing is, when you meet a newborn baby who's coming from a complete another realm of not part of this world, as the parents, you need to meet the baby calm and peaceful, because the world is not always like that. And if the mother and the father who's holding the baby isn't like that, the baby's also going to develop tension, So I also teach antenatal belly to birth classes, which are not classes with any technology. It's bringing moms and dads into a room, into a place for 5 hours and just helping them to learn how to decompress. So that's basically my work. It's also when the baby's born into the environment. I'm not a medic. I'm just somebody who holds space, who sometimes has to stand behind a doctor and calm a doctor down, or switch the lights down, or just create the atmosphere so that the baby can be born peacefully. And then as soon as the baby's born, also go and look in the baby's eyes and talk to the baby and recognize that they say, hello, welcome. You know, this is planet Earth. And at first the medics probably think I'm nuts. They're like, what is this woman? And then they follow through. So I guess I've realized that today, a lot about my job is helping people to remind us that we are loving human beings and we're not just robotical people, you know? Hannah's busy treating me at the moment, and she's helping me a lot actually in my own body, because obviously a lot of being on call, working 15, 16 hours, your body does start to become tired and inflamed. And thank you, Hannah. You're helping me a lot with your lovely energy. Yeah, so that's my story.
I love that. Thank you so, so much, Gayle. I mean, it's so true, just leading on from that. It's undervalued how important energy work is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of healers, a lot of even, you know, psychology and the Western world is understanding the benefit of incorporating holistic practices and teachings into their work, that we can't separate the physical body from the mental, emotional, and energetic.
Yeah.
I think where we are in the world, like, I think we are in a place now in the world where that's being called for. Like, people are recognizing they need to incorporate a more holistic approach to things. And you know, your words just run so true. There's so much power. The subtle body is so powerful, but people need guidance of how to tap into it. So the work that you're doing is just stunning. I think those that have been blessed to have you in their path and have their children come through, having a doula like you and Hannah having the chiropractics and the passion behind it makes all the difference, because it's a huge thing, bringing being into this physical world. This physical world is hard, you know. It's not necessarily gentle, like you said, you know. And we get so geared. Everything in this world is like, we get geared to, you know, you speak about when people get fit, it's about toning and tuning, and it's actually about hardening, holding and gripping.
Yeah,
You know,
that's the thing.
we do have to look at that balance of softening for health.
Yeah. You see, that's what I see. I see women and the female within all of us as your strength is actually in your fragility and in your vulnerability, not in shining up and trying to be like men and trying to, it's wrong. It's not, that's my opinion, of course, like, you know, but it's being strong and healthy, but there needs to be that movement, that flow within, which is also, Hannah, your nervous system, right? Because if there's tension, the nerves can't move and do what they have to do. It's actually so simple that it's difficult, I think, for you. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Yeah.
I agree 100%, because you know, the more I've in the past few years, I've really sort of cultivated an interest in medicine with my own sort of health journeys, and listened to a lot of medical lectures, lectures on nutrition, on health, on healing, and it all, you know, one could get into the details of medical terminology, but the essence is actually incredibly simple. It's really about including healthy practices. It goes down to the basics of exactly what you know, what babies needs is what adults need, which, you know, you can both vouch for. You know, they need to be able to sleep well, eat well, rest well, feel well.
Exactly.
You know, it's all of those things. It's and no matter what disease anybody has, when you speak to adults and you look at their, I mean, and Hannah, you're dealing with people from all walks, from with all sorts of ailments at different stages of their life. It all boils down to, how are you moving? How are you breathing? How are you thinking? How are you eating? How are you resting? It's still the same thing. So you're right. I just think that health is.
I mean, that's the ultimate, is breathe, which is what was in yoga practice. Because if you think about birth, like as that baby comes out, it's like every single person in the room is waiting to see, is the baby breathing? It's like no one says it, no one speaks it, but it's like, and part of our work is also that when the baby comes out, it's still attached to the mother's cord, where it's getting the oxygen and it has a chance to itself first before they cut that cord, so that it's not coming out and going, because that's your vibration that you walk through life with. Yes. After, So it's that essential, are we breathing? Are we breathing? Because if you're breathing, everything can flow better. Oxygen gets into the cells, into the muscles. Yeah, it's amazing.
Absolutely. It's a delight to actually have this conversation with the two of you. So feel free to unmute yourself with pleasure, Hannah. I can see you on mute still. Just because there's so much, if you think, I mean, it's obvious, but saying it out loud, that first initial experience and breath of the child is going to set up for them their first, it's like first impressions, their first impression of planet Earth, and working with the moms and their spine and their comfortability and relaxing them on both levels between the two of you, how the mom feels at that experience, at that time of birthing, will set up her navigating forward with the being that she's just brought through, so it is, I think this work is so amazing. I think about a lot of the parents from the generation that I came from. None of this was like so far removed from the reality of having children in the 70s,
Even goes so far as, in birth, like if a mother is tense or if a baby's in distress, then the first thing I do is tell the mother to breathe, the mother to relax, the father to relax, and then you note that the baby does the same thing. Or if the mum's not feeding, can't get feeding the baby, then you get the mom to eat. It's amazing in that first, how it's just one, that there's an invisible cord still connecting, maybe for life, you to your mother, because you're born of that person. It's a lot for everyone to think about, actually, it's like you are living. I think we underestimate creation. You're living inside somebody else's body, and then you come out into the world with all that and yourself, that's something.
Yeah, that's so true, Gayle, what you say about that connection that's still there afterwards. Like, I remember noticing that so obviously with my daughter, that breathing thing, like when she would, like in those first few months, and trying to put her to sleep or doing something, and she's getting panicky and I'm getting panicky, and then just someone had told me, I forget who, but like, just breathe. And you look at this little baby that's like 2 weeks old, and then they take a deep breath and just calm down. It's amazing. And like, even things that you can't explain, as like something I'd noticed for a long time, like I'm thinking like months now with our daughter, is that we would have like a bowel movement within like the same 5 minutes. And I'm like, I don't know how you explain that. Like, I ate at a different time to when she was feeding, but somehow we like, and it would happen so often that you're just like still so connected. And even sorry.
No, I'm agreeing with you totally.
Yeah. And even just like going back to what you were saying about that that time in the room as a baby's born, where they about to take their first breath, are taking their first breath. There's almost this like period of time where they're out of you, but they haven't breathed yet. They're still connected to your placenta, and they're getting your oxygenated blood. I'm just thinking back to when our daughter was born. We did a home birth with her, and we had midwives. We were in Canada at the time, and one of our midwives I would describe as very holistic and natural, and we aligned a lot more with her way of thinking. And the other one I would say is a lot more medicalized. It was kind of like bringing a little piece of the hospital into our home. And just in our pregnancy, we had picked up that she was a lot more medicalized, and I think both of them had great things to offer, pregnant moms and birthing. But there was, when we birthed our daughter, there was a couple things that like went wrong. We had listened to podcasts and like the top 3 things that go wrong in a home birth, and we ended up having 2 of them, or not in just home birth, but any birth. And we had 2 of the 3 that happened, and everything was fine in the end. One of them was that her shoulders got stuck coming out, and that was purely a positional thing. I was in a cramped small bath because we hadn't picked up our birth pool yet, because I was convinced I'd be pregnant after 40 weeks, and she came at 37 weeks. So that was one thing. And then because of the twisting and pulling they did to get her out, rather than getting me to change positions, she came out, and there was this period of time where she didn't breathe. And it was, like in the moment, Josh and I didn't panic. We felt such calm about it. She was, we'd listened to podcasts and stories where this was the variation of normal. She was still attached to the pulsing placenta and pulsing umbilical cord and my placenta. And we both were calm about it, but the medicalized midwife started panicking. She called for the other midwife to come in and cut the cord to move her to get oxygen. And while she was calling out all these instructions, and while she was bringing the scissors to cut her cord, I actually shouted at her, and I was like, "Don't cut the cord." And we have it on video where I was like really just shouted at her, like, "Don't cut the cord." And she brought the oxygen tank closer, and she didn't need to give her oxygen. They just did like some puffs of room air, and she breathed, and everything was fine. It just, it was interesting just to see like how that, like looking back now, that there was too much panic. There was no need to panic for the situation she was in. Like, she was still getting oxygenated blood from me. She was just in that like pause between being inside me and being separate. And it's a space of time that I really want to protect in our next births, where like, hey, no one's interfering with this. Like, she'll breathe when she's ready. Like, obviously there's a window period where you don't want to be silly about it, but we were way within that window period. And she was simply just still getting the oxygen she needed and transitioning into this new world. And it's just like interesting when you brought that up on that period of time. It's
because a baby's living in water inside. They're like a fish. They're full of water, right? And when they come out, that water's got to be cleared. And the first breath, the lungs and the heart start to open up. And then there's the sensory overload. They're seeing, they're hearing, they're smelling. Like, it's huge what happens. It's huge, actually. Okay, someone talk there, I think.
Yes, I'm going to quickly just interrupt and say, Ilana, I can see your hand. I don't know if you can hear us, Ilana. Hi, you don't look like Ilana. Unmute yourself, because it's a bit, you're on mute.
Okay, now we're unmuted.
Hi.
Is that better?
Yes.
Hi there, can you see me?
Yes,
we can see me.
See. Yes.
Excellent. So I'm Ilana's husband. I've come in sort of, I think, on the tail end of this very interesting conversation. We had a child about 17 years ago. That's a bit of context. I'm also a psychologist here in Johannesburg. And I was wondering, this early entry into the world when a child comes through, what is the first emotion that a child feels? I mean, I would think it's actually quite terrifying, into these lights, into these strange people around the baby. and then it calms down when it's maybe put away in a warm, comfortable place again. But it raises questions about the first initial emotion.
Yeah.
Does a child come into a world of love, or is the child in fact experiencing more this strange, terrifying, scary sort of experience that the child has? So it's always a sort of a question, what comes first? A whole question bigger than as adults, what comes first, love or hate? And what is the initial emotion that we create and that is created when we are delivered into this world?
But I think that's what the whole doula concept is that we are trying to be an invisible, quiet force that can let the medics take care, but that can hold the baby and talk to the baby and get it skin to skin as soon as possible, or that it's not checked and that they look at everything's physically. It's just like Hannah said, just give the baby a moment. It's huge. It's absolutely huge,
And I agree totally, this thing with skin to skin, sort of the tactile approach, and how that sort of soft touch soothes, calms the baby down, as opposed to all these weird people looking and lights that you're coming into. I think it must be quite a terrifying experience initially, in the first few seconds of the baby's life. Or not life, but the life is sort of when it's born into this world.
Entry, absolutely.
Yes.
And that's why a lot of mothers want to do home birth, because they feel it's more, I was this afternoon, I was at a home where we're setting up for a home birth and creating the space, and you've got a fully qualified midwife, and she comes with oxygen, it's not just no one there, and giving the parents, this is the ambulance number. So taking care that if anything goes wrong, we're on track, but it just gives the parents and the baby just smells that it's going to be used to for its life. That's what I'm questioning. I'm not for 1 minute saying I'm not grateful for medical technology and emergencies, but on average, it's only not all babies that happens. And is that space what makes moms so frightened? And is that why births can go wrong, because of the environment,
Yes, very much. I mean, I think the support that the mother feels, either from the father who's also in the room, I think hopefully, but that the mother's allowed to bond and attach as the days go by, and that's always stressed sort of in the world of psychology, how important those first few weeks are, and that the father is then in the background, the mother can bond, can attach, and not create a sort of a fractious early relationship with the infant. So
thank you.
I think that's enough from me. Thank you. Interesting topic.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to, before the lights go out, I just want to say a hearty thank you to Hannah and to Gayle for joining us this evening. It was such a delicious conversation. It really informed me a lot, and it gave me a good food for thought. And I love the premise of it. It is so important. There's nothing more important than the creation. That's how we're here, and supporting this on so many levels, supporting it physically, mentally, emotionally, and energetically. To have two ladies like you doing the work that you're doing of such beautiful service. I salute you both and thank you so much. So if you would like, I'm going to share your details on the group, and if people would like to get hold of you for any consultations or further conversations, then I'm going to make that available. So ladies, thank you for joining me. Thank you everybody else for coming this evening. And keep warm and tune in next month. We're going to have a plant-based chef who's joining us in the house. So.
Lovely.